To be quite honest with you, I don't really see much from this distance. We may or may not be recording, we may or may not be in focus, we may or may not be well lit. It's just a mystery. Hello and welcome to another heat wave video. The temperatures are wonderful in the 37 or 38, quite hot, and we are looking at more than a week of very hot temperatures, so that is lovely. Of course, as always, I decided to be extremely realistic, and I decided that today should be my most productive day, where I will repot Hoyas, philodendrons, and propagate some philodendrons, but I'm not going to do all of it in this video. In fact, we envisioned, by we mean Miro, we envisioned to record 3 videos today, which is like 8 hours of just sitting here and talking to myself. So it's a normal Wednesday. As you can see, someone has rearranged the things, and I was actually going to upload that video before this one, but I think because there is a lot of work with editing with that video, I think I'm going to do it sometime later. But as you can see, most of my aeroids are out of my Semihydro grow tents, and now those tents are dedicated to Hoyas. There are some aeroids on the lower levels that, you know, are just more mite friendly, and we do not want them outside. We do not want to expose them to anything that ideal humidity, though they can definitely get mites in the tents. But that is not what today's video is about. Today I think I want to repot 4 Hoyas, but I do have like million to repot, so I may repot more depending how many things I have to say. Because aside from repotting, I wanted to reply to one question. Well, I've been getting this question a lot, is why I no longer grow Hoyas in Semihydro. I did want to say one thing, and that thing is to subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed, because for some reason people say you should do it at the beginning of the video, like mention people to subscribe, something to do with, I don't really know what's it to do with. I really thought it doesn't matter, but clearly I also thought that it doesn't matter how you appear in the videos, so I don't think I'm very good at this YouTube thing. First Hoya that we will repot is siglabra from Ulu Apin Apin, and I did repot this Hoya. I don't remember if I did it in a video or not, but I did repot it from Semihydro to a mix of cocoa peat and perlite and some pumice. I think it was in March. I don't think you can see very well from that distance, but well, you can. Okay. Stop falling apart. Okay, I'm going to take her off the trellis. She is quite long. I've had this plant since... Let's just not. So I've had this plant since, I think, May or June of last year. I did have a tag in it that said the date, but I don't have it anymore. And she grew not super fast, but she grew. We can see that mine goes all the way up there. It started off as a 1-leaf, 1-note cutting, and initially it grew in Semihydro, but I decided to just not grow my plants in Semihydro anymore, and I decided to transplant them. And so what I did here is I put this plant into a mix with cocoa peat and perlite. Now, transitions from Semihydro to organic mixes are not always very smooth. Sometimes you will get some roots dying back, and to kind of minimize that, or, you know, just not to have too many roots dying back, or, you know, not to have a substantial amount of root rot, I decided to put it in a very small pot. This is 10 centimeters, and she grew. There are roots here, literally. I don't know if that is visible. And there are roots obviously down here. So roots are everywhere. This is very root bound. So I am repotting it to a 15 centimeter pot. I don't really want to be watering this every single day. As you can see, I actually left water in that pot so it could get some moisture, because to be quite honest with you, this needs to be watered a lot. And this plant would probably grow even better if it did get enough of water. I also wish I did not have all this dust on the leaves, but that is beside the point. So we will repot it to one of these 15 centimeter pots, and hopefully this means that she can stay in those for the rest of its life. I'm being very optimistic here that I will never have to repot this plant. Honestly, when you look at it, it's not even that big of an upsize. First, let's empty the potting mix because that's going to be noisy. I love when things don't go as planned. Those are some very nice, healthy looking roots. I'm going to try to break it down just a bit. I'm going to stop here. I don't really want to break it up entirely. I just really want to cover this top layer. As you could see in that pot, I really potted this plant so that the soil was flush with the edge of the pot, which I'm trying to avoid now because it's really not that good for watering. It makes a mess everywhere. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do cocoa peat and perlite. Mostly. I think I have some bark, so I may do a bit of bark, but I'm really going to try not to make a mix that is too airy, that is too perlite-y, which I tend to do. I tend to just go overboard with perlite because I would really like to keep this plant hydrated, and I would really like to water it once a week if possible. There is already a lot of cocoa peat and perlite and well, there is actually mostly, I think, pumice and perlite in the mix. It's just a whole bunch of pumice. We were not saving pumice on that day, clearly. So I'm going to do something that is more water retentive because every time I repot one of these plants, I think to myself, sure, add more perlite. It's fine if you have to water, 2, 3, 4 times a week. That's fine. It goes quickly, and then, when the time actually comes to water them, I don't do it. By the way, this cocoa peat isn't even pure cocoa peat. I was repotting some plants in here, and I have some pumice and perlite already in there. Not a lot, but it's not virgin cocoa peat. Now listen, Miro. I think that's enough. I don't even know if you can see that. This is kind of what the mix is looking like. I am going to put just a tiny amount of bark. Okay. So, why am I moving away from Semihydro? Or actually, I'm not moving away, I have gone. I've moved away. Or actually, to be more specific, I've moved away from using leca for plants. The topic is a bit complex. First of all, what I need to say is that I have had a very good experience growing plants, not just Hoyas, orchids and aroids in Semihydro, even begonias. I don't even know what else I had. I think peperomias too and violets. Those were also in Semihydro. And it was a good experience. There wasn't anything terrible about it, but over time it just becomes very difficult to take care of those plants, at least for me. I don't think all of my plants were in Semihydro, and that was part of the problem because I had plants in Semihydro and I had plants in organic mixes. So, I would have Hoyas in bark and moss, and I had Hoyas in Semihydro. I had aroids in organic mixes, aroids in inorganic mixes. And just that is 4 different batches of water that you need to mix. So we're not about that life anymore. I think 2 is the top here that I can do. So let me just fill in this with some potting mix. See, it's already, you know what? We're not doing this. We're not doing this. I want to have 2 centimeters of space on the top. Where was I? Oh yeah, for smaller plants, for smaller pots, maybe say better, it actually worked quite well. It's not too difficult. Where it becomes challenging is with bigger plants, with bigger pots, and the maintenance there starts to become very difficult. For me, at least. And that goes, from watering, from how long it takes to water, to, how much water you need for bigger plants. I remember I had my big variegated monstera, which I have since cut down because I wanted to transfer it to something more organic or to something completely organic. And I remember when I would water that plant, I would need like crazy amounts of water, maybe 3 liters of water or 4 even. So it was in a giant pot. It was a big plant too, but I had several plants like that and it was just too much water. that I had to use. And I'm not saying that you will have to use less water, because obviously when you water a big plant in Semihydro, it can stay hydrated for longer. But once you do have to water it, it does take quite a long time. Now with, in different mixes, it's a bit faster for me, or at least that's my experience. I don't know. Another thing that I really disliked about growing in Semihydro is whenever I would repot a plant, I would definitely get some root dieback. And they do grow back quickly, and then you have dead roots in the pot, and I don't know, it just really bothered me to see dead roots, and even though you flush them, you flush the pots, they were still there. I really did not like that, and over time, it just starts, the bottom of the pot, at least for me, it started to kind of look nasty and gooey, and I did not love that look. Another thing that I absolutely hated is sometimes, especially like in winter, when you have nutrient solution there, after, a week of it sitting there, it started to stink. It started to stink. You couldn't really smell it when you are in the room, when you are around the plants, but like when you lift the plant from the pot, it was not something that I enjoyed. This may not be experience for everyone, and that was certainly not the deciding factor, but it was just one of the things that I didn't really enjoy. One of the several things that I didn't really enjoy. Oh, see, that's much better. What I also didn't like, and what was one of the bigger issues for me, is in the winter, it just seemed to me that the water would get too cold in the reservoir. I just am not convinced completely. Ambient temperature is around maybe 22 in the winter, so that should be the temperature of the water, but to me that just, I don't know, it seemed a bit too cold, and for roots to be constantly sitting in that, I did get some dieback every now and then, and the dieback, maybe it's not from that, maybe it's from pH, altering pH. It's definitely something that made me nervous, and really the deciding factor for me in the end was, well, what's the benefit? And when I really sit down and think about it, well, there was really no major benefits, at least not for me. Excellent. When you start getting into Semihydro, you are easily sold on things like reusability. You can reuse it, you can clean it, you can boil it and whatnot. But the reality for me was that I wasn't really doing that. I would have infinite buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets of old leca that I wasn't really washing because it was much easier to buy a new one. From time to time I would boil it, but it wasn't just happening as often, and it just wasn't really a pleasurable experience to clean it as well, and honestly it takes quite some time. And also another thing is, when you have a lot of plants, a lot of different plants, there would come a time where I just had no idea. I would put leca in different buckets, and at one point I had no idea, did I put some leca from orchids in that? Is it just from hoyas? Because I had an issue with virus on my orchids, and I didn't know that I put contaminated leca by accident with the leca that is just, supposed to be okay to reuse. Plus the root mealybugs also, I wasn't, it made me really nervous to reuse the leca from root mealybugs. Even though, like, when you boil it, and I would boil it for like 15 or 20 minutes, it's supposed to be, they're supposed to be dead, but I don't know. It just made me nervous to reuse that leca. And I don't actually remember if I reused it or not. I might have reused some of it, but I don't think I reused all of it. I think this is repotted. Now listen to me. You are not going to grow out of this pot. You are not getting a new pot for the next 3 years. Just saying. So, be careful what you do with the new space that I gave you. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there who do grow in Semihydro and love Semihydro, and I'm not saying it doesn't work. I think it does work. I was very curious because there is just a lot of also negativity about growing in Semihydro, so I was very curious to try it out, and as I said, it did work for me, but in the end, I just didn't see as much benefit. I don't really have issue growing Hoyas in organic mixes, not that I've noticed. I don't have issue growing them in pond or Semihydro. Usually most of my issues are related to underwatering the plants, and that, by the way, also happened in Semihydro, because then you get into this lazy schedule that you don't have to water every week, but maybe every 2 or 3 weeks. But then, you know, once the summer rolls in, you definitely do need to water more, and you're just not used to it. Also, another thing that I noticed during the winter is that a lot of plants were kind of out of sync. I kind of like to water them all on the same day. I know I'm terrible. But there would just be times when I thought that the reservoir was empty and it wasn't, and I don't have indicators. Those pots are almost impossible to come by here where I live, and I don't want to import pots. What happened is that with the hanging plants, I overfilled the pot, like by a lot. It was a waterfall, so I was like, you know what, no, this is ridiculous. I'm not gaining that much in the end, and you know, I'm clearly not having a good time, and that's why I decided to stop. It's not very complicated, but I do think that, again, I will repeat this once again, I think that Semihydro works, and maybe in different environment I would stick to it, but for me there are alternatives to Semihydro that I liked more and that are still inorganic. I did shower that plant and I took it out so it can kind of dry before I put it in the cover pot. So in the meantime, we will repot this magnificent creature. This is Hoya meridithii. A lot of the times people will say Hoya meridithii Ted Green. I just want to say, why? Or there will sometimes say Hoya meridithii Green. Yes, this plant was published by Ted Green, but we don't really say that for other Hoyas, do we? So why just with this one? I think that some people think it's a descriptor. It is not. So can we just call it Hoya meridithii? I have also very optimistically put this into a 10 centimeter pot, and clearly some poor decisions were made there. This was also in Semihydro, and it did fine in Semihydro. I think Hoya meridithii is just very easygoing Hoya to have. I'm actually probably going to take a cutting of this one for sale because a lady did want to buy it. I actually think it's a different part of the plant I'm cutting. It gets these beautiful big leaves. It's a very beautiful plant, and I restarted this one last year because of the root mealybugs, and I kept couple of cuttings for myself with 1 or 2 leaves, and I actually think, yeah, 2 cuttings. And they grew quite a lot. I'm very happy with that. I'm not happy with me putting it in 10 centimeter pot. Not a good decision. This is what the plant looks like. She does have quite a lot of roots here on the bottom. So I'm going to try to release them, but to be quite honest with you, I had absolute zero luck with releasing. To be quite honest with you, I had absolute zero luck releasing the roots from these inner shelves. As you can see, once again, we made a little mountain there with potting mix, we're trying to avoid that now. Clearly, we put her in a very small pot. I don't know why I keep talking about myself in plural. The Semihydro thing, I honestly don't have anything against it. I don't think it's a bad method of growing plants. I think it can work really well, but I just think, for me, it requires more commitment than I am ready to give. And that's because there is a lot of them. So I hope that answers that question. Out of the inorganic mixes, my preference to some extent is pond, but also pond without self-watering pot is a nightmare. For some plants, not for all of them, but for some it's really a nightmare, especially now in summer. So we did lose some of the roots. Not a lot, but you know. And now we have to get through the holes of the pot, which is another obstacle. I don't know, can you see that? Can you see that? That was repotted in April. I really hope that this can fit in this pot without me breaking up the root ball. Oh, it can, excellent. Whew. One thing that I did not try is to mix leca, ceramis, and pon together in an inorganic mix. Maybe I will try that next. I don't know. I'm definitely not going to do that for all of the plants. If I do that, I'm going to do it on a very small scale, just to see if that works and is there any benefit to that at all. I do apologize if you cannot see this. Such is life. Yeah. I do wish I left more of the space. Oh, we're stuck. We're stuck. We are very stuck. Okay. Ah! Jesus God. Hoya meridithii is, in my experience, Hoya that does definitely want a bit more moisture. So I really hope that this is going to work just a tiny bit better for this plant. The previous mix was fine, but again, it does get dry very, very fast, and we saw why, because there is very little, very little anything there that holds on to moisture. It's a lot of perlite and a lot of pumice. So what I'm going to do here is, if I can find my scissors, I do have some dry vines here that I'm going to trim. A lot of them do have baby leaves that could potentially come in, so I'm leaving those, but any vines where I don't see there's any possibility that a leaf will come in, and you can recognize that by scarring on the node, then I will cut those off. I'm going to shower this plant, and I'm going to come back with the next plant I need to repot. So the next plant I would like to repot is my variegated Hoya kerrii, and we're stuck. It has been growing well for me, but in the past couple of months, I would say it stopped, and I definitely see some dry leaves here. And I also know that I have been under watering her while she has been receiving a lot of light in the Millsbo cabinet. So I want to repot her to a mix that will hold a bit more water. This is in pon, and it is in DIY pon that I make. And I think eventually I will move this plant out of my cabinet, so I will put it in a mix with coco peat so it can hold on to more moisture once it is outside of the cabinet, which I do think will be quite soon. I do intend to make a Hoya wall next to that Rotsta cabinet, which you cannot see right now, and I do think that's where this plant will eventually go. So the roots look fine. I do now have some pon here in this coco peat and perlite mix, and I do actually need a bit more mix, so I will just add more coco peat and perlite to that. It's kind of like pon and everything else. I have been using a mix with coco peat, perlite, and pumice, and it's worked well, so I don't think adding a bit of lava rock will be an issue here, which is what pon has: lava rock, pumice, and zeolite. I do suspect this plant has mites, or maybe a bit of mites, so I will definitely be treating her as soon as I repot her. She's going into this 10 centimeter pot. It says 12, but it's definitely not 12. I think it's actually 11 when I measured it. So it's gonna go into this pot, and I will treat it for mites just to be sure there are none. And I will return it, I think, for the time being in the Millsbo cabinet, but I do intend to not grow it in the cabinet anymore because I think I will put some other Hoyas in there. At the end of the day, I would actually like a huge Hoya kerrii. It's one of my favorite Hoyas, as you already know. Definitely let me know your opinions on the mixes. Again, this is not to dissuade you from using Semihydro. I think if you want to try a mix out, do it. Don't let people dissuade you. Obviously listen to some advice if people have some advice, but if you're anything like me, you will definitely need to learn from your experience if something works for you or not. I'm kind of like, if I don't try it, I just cannot sit still. I have to try it and to see, is this something that maybe works for me or not? It's one of the issues being me. But I wouldn't say I had too many issues with Semihydro, and maybe in the future we will come back to it. I don't know. Maybe I will try a mix that has both leca and pon in it. And do let me know actually if you are using a mix with leca and with pon together. I know there are people out there that do, so if you are one of them, share your experience. I mean, I'm always looking forward to trying out a new mix. I will give it some water and I will shower it and then I will treat it for mites. And actually, I think I might take all of my plants from the cabinet and just make sure that they're all treated for mites. I do have some plants there that have been acting a bit suspiciously, so I do want to make sure that there are no mites there. I do actually think there are some in some plants. Shockingly, Hoya bella is one of them. And we do have one last plant for today. This is my Hoya litophytica. This plant grew quite a lot, but I do have to say I have not been treating it well because she is a mite magnet. I don't know if you have the same experience with Hoya litophytica, but this one has just been, it had mites quite a few times and I am just not in love with that. I think I was keeping it next to my cabinet on the floor. I took it out of my cabinet because it's probably patient zero for some of the mites that I have now in there, but I do see mite damage on the leaves. I will try to actually give you a close-up of that so you can see how that looks like. It is in a very tiny pot and I'm going to move it to a 10 centimeter pot. This is like 6'5", I don't even know. What is this? But I'm going to move it to this pot here and I think it's going to grow a bit better because it will also have more moisture. I do think, however, that I will leave it in pon. I would like you to let me know in the comments what mix you are using now, what mixes you have tried out so far, what worked the best for you and what didn't. This isn't really an invitation so we can discuss which is the most superior mix. I know there are always stands of a particular mix. I think that all of them have their pros and their cons. It's just figuring out what's the best for you. In my case, a mix of both seems to be working quite well. This is my bowl of pon. I'm honestly just going to add some pon here to this coco peat. Maybe mix it in a bit, so it's not just pon, and use that. So there is some coco peat to that. Oh, my mite ravaged baby. I also think it's important to find a mix that goes well for your lifestyle. I honestly tend to overestimate myself and I think, you know, it's fine. I'm going to make a mix that is very airy and it's fine if I have to water every other day because when I water, it doesn't take too much. It's like hour and a half at most to water all of the plants. But when it comes to that moment that you need to water everything, suddenly it becomes like the biggest chore ever, even though you said to yourself, it's fine if I make this very airy mix. Especially during these very hot summer months. Oh gosh, I really, really wish I didn't put all of them in such airy mixes. Because, there is airy, and then there is Miro airy, and Miro airy is just, like, what were we thinking here? Okay, I think that's going to work much better for this plant, and I'm probably going to keep it hanging. Actually, I think I'm going to put it in this Ratsta cabinet here. I will keep it outside of the cabinet a bit more, just to make sure there are no mites, which hopefully there will be no more of. Really, this is a plant that it's so easy for her to get mites. It's not funny. Not funny at all. Do you remember that tub of perlite? I spilled that. Kill me. So, we are half an hour later after I had to cough and pick up all that perlite. I have my pots here for the Hoyas. They clearly cannot go in the same cover pot, so I have 15 centimeter cover pots, and I do think these are going to be small, but I don't care. They will have to fit somehow, and work with the pot, work with the hanger. I'm going to reuse the same hangers, so I kind of close them on two sides until I get the plant in, and you're going to now see what I'm talking about and how this doesn't really fit. When I said it doesn't really fit, I actually thought it was gonna fit better than this. But will it work? Yeah, it kind of will work. Okay, it's a tight fit. That's a wrong tool. All right, so we have it hanging, and it actually might be helpful, this being such a tight fit, because this kind of stays up which will definitely help me trellising, because the way I trellis these, I actually take them to my bathtub and I use the curtain rod. I hang it on the curtain rod and then I trellis them. So I feel that this is helpful and we appreciate that. This vine though, okay, so we are lost here. I sort of think this was like this. Okay, I'm going to put it here. I still have no idea where this vine was. I feel this was probably going up. That's what this leaf is telling me. It was probably going up here. And then I have no idea what was happening with that. Maybe something like this. Let's just try to go. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna do that. Underneath that vine and kind of bring it up here. So it doesn't look too bad. It's fine. And I think it actually looks better, potentially. Not really. But it's a lovely plant and I'm going to put it up in the window. It's just right next to me. You know what I didn't consider? That putting it in a bigger pot will make it heavier and that my bar hanging in the window may not hold it. Now let's try to get this siglabra in. I think this one, should we go around? Kind of doesn't want to. Maybe like this. You know what? I think like this. Because I want to bring it down and up. I have no idea what I'm trying to do. My motto here with these hanging pots is there's no way to make them look great. Which is why I choose to use them. Because then no one can judge me that my trellising is bad. Because there's no way to make this look great. And then maybe we can do something like this. It's done. You know what? It's a wild look. We are going for a wild look. This is what we wanted. That's exactly what I wanted. That is all for today, and I hope that you enjoyed that video. Let me know down in the comments below what potting mix or potting media do you currently use, and how many times did you change it since starting your Hoya journey or your plant journey. I would love to know. I would love to hear if you have any potting mix suggestions. I know that there are plenty out there, and I always like to hear some new ideas. And of course, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, so we reminded you at the beginning and at the end. So that should probably do something, I don't really know. You know what, it's too hot to even use the brain. Not that it's any better when it's not so hot. Have a wonderful week and I will see you soon. Bye! I would like to take some time to thank my patrons. A massive shout out to my $5 patrons. My 2 anonymous patrons, Alex von Siebenthal, Anne Margaret Moen, Betsy Begonia, Bonnie Harris, Kerrii, Cynthia Taylor, Danube Daniels, Estelle Farah, Gina Geise, Houseborn Heather, Hoya Heather, Jacques Plan Journey, Jessica Chio, Kayla Vavra, Kelso, Kristen Sherwood, Lauren Alexandra, Mars B, Martina, Alif Perde, Melissa Walker, Nicole Ferranti, Nicole and Caleb of Schlieve Tropicals, Nita Macy, PJ, Rachel Colette Conroy, Robin L. Jennings, Ruby, Sherry Kumar, Stephanie H2O, Spinach Geek, Tanya, TJWO, Wojtek Takach, Wendy Foreman, and Zlokobni Pony. Also a big thank you to my $3 patrons, Alexandra R, Angelina Farnan, Anne Margaret, Brianna Phillips, Cologne, Claudia L, David Candia, Jerry's Garden, Lisa Helling, Morgan Kennedy, Morgana Devina, Nella, Nerdy Kathy, Plantolania, Ringlo, Sheila Mason Casper, and Tang Watanas Riakul. And a thank you to my $1 patrons, Brandon Pacheco, Caroline Kerrii, Erin Keenan, Lauren M, Lori N Subramaniam, Marissa, and Paula Plants. Thank you so much for incredible support. I hope that where you are, it was not as hot as it was here, because recently we hit wonderful 43 degrees. And you know what? It definitely feels just like it sounds like. When you go out, it feels like your face is on fire. I do not recommend. I hope you're all well, stay safe, and stay hydrated, and see you soon!